but I can't promise. President Trump proposes to make health care more affordable, and yet Democrats are howling in agony. Health and Human Services Secretary Alex Azar is here exclusively on what this means for you. It's his first interview. Plus, the president makes a move toward gun control. Are there bigger measures to come? And also a sanctuary city drowning in human feces and garbage. You're not going to believe what was found on the streets of San Francisco. But first, celebs rush in to fix democracy. That's the subject of tonight's angle. Now, this is very exciting. In case you haven't heard, Hunger Games starlet Jennifer Lawrence made a big announcement yesterday.
I'm going to take the next year off. I'm going to be working with this organization I'm a part of, Represent Us.
What is that?
It's just trying to get, young people engaged politically, on a local level.
That's awesome.
It doesn't have anything to do with partisans. It's just anti-corruption and stuff, trying to pass state-by-state laws that can help prevent corruption, fix our democracy.
That's all. Wow. Well, we also learned today that actor George Clooney is donating $500,000 for the March for Our Lives. That's promoted as a totally student-organized gun control rally. And the Ocean's 11 actor, the tequila baron, he's been sniffing around politics for 20-plus years. Let's not forget, in 2016, he raised $15 million in one weekend. That's pretty good for Hillary Clinton and other Democrats. And, of course, he was horrified by that.
It is an obscene amount of money. The Sanders campaign, when they talk about it, is absolutely right. It's ridiculous that we should have this kind of money in politics. I agree completely.
Of course, you got to love Clooney because he went out to say, if asked, he'd engage in this obscene act again and keep raising money. I mean, it's legal, so he's going to keep doing it. In 2016, Tinseltown thought that they could continue their Hollywood on the Potomac routine by putting all their chips on Hillary. After all, they'd helped her husband, who had been a fairly successful two-term president, minus that impeachment thing, and they stayed in the Lincoln bedroom, they flocked to the White House Correspondents' Dinner, it was all hunky-dory. But Hollywood was cut out of the picture under George W., and Hollywood mocked him endlessly and viciously. So when the most left-wing president ever was elected, Barack Obama, it was nirvana for all those entertainers who had felt disrespected and offended by the very existence of Bush and certainly of conservatives. But with the Obamas, they celebrated from the beginning. The inauguration.
Please welcome Beyonce.
Birthdays.
The President of these United States.
White House parties.
In the White House.
On this. Even in the Situation Room. That is a cool photo. All the way to the end.
For 8 years, you kept your word and your calm. You are the epitome of cool.
They are having fun. Come on. Doesn't that look fun? And it was sad to see President Obama go because he echoed their worldview. And as Samuel Jackson said, he had that Hollywood cool factor. Let's face it. Trump, even though he had a hit show with The Apprentice, he was never really part of their world because on some key issues, he thought differently and he dared to speak up. When so many in the entertainment arena put all their money, their chips on Hillary and Anna Wintour, let's face it, when Trump was elected, they were embarrassed and furious. Most in the entertainment and sports in crowd, they see Trump supporters as either ignorant, racist, or Bible-thumping fanatics. George Clooney, to his credit, put blame where it belonged, on Hillary. He told the Daily Beast, after she lost, it was frustrating because I never saw her elevate her game. I never saw it. And I had a lot of liberal friends who were like, she's not good at this. Well, I agree, George. And let's face it, top-tier celebs surrounded by PR people, managers, agents, and millions of adoring fans, they can get pretty used to coasting on political cliches. They're used to dishing it out against conservatives, sometimes in the vilest of terms, without ever having to explain themselves and without ever getting called on it. So when celebs wade into politics, as we're seeing today with Jennifer Lawrence and George Clooney, well, they win fans on their political side, but then they can alienate many more. You think of what happened, for instance, when the NFL, kind of star, well, they're all stars, Colin Kaepernick, refused to stand for the anthem. What happened was he spurred other players to do the same. Well, then the NFL lost tens of millions of dollars in advertising revenue during the regular season as viewership took a sizable hit and attendance was down. People were furious. So if too heavily infected by politics, the sports, stage, and screen, they kind of just become like everything else in Washington, nasty and polarizing. Call me crazy, but I think we need more, not fewer places where we can gather, cheer, and even boo without worrying about politics. Everyone has the right to speak their mind, but stars on screen and those on the field should know that when they traffic in hateful political vitriol, they're likely to get some serious pushback, just like the rest of us in politics or political analysis. Well, now it's your turn, Clooney and Jennifer Lawrence. Why don't you explain beyond just epithets or bromides, or cliches, or sometimes maybe insults, your own ideas on how to grow the economy, how to increase the standard of living for the poor and middle-class Americans, how to decrease violence and drug addiction. You see, if you really want to get into the political ring, really, you can't just talk to your fans or even write a check. You need to be daring enough to go into unfamiliar and even hostile territory and answer tough questions. Think about Oprah. Maybe for a millisecond, she mulled dipping her toe into the political pond, and then she quickly pulled it out. There were rumors of Kid Rock running for the Senate, rumors that The Rock may hit the trail. Well, now Clooney, who's worth hundreds of millions of dollars, good on him for earning that cash, he's shoveling money at gun control. It's his right to do that. But as Democrats watch, worry, and hope that, someone's their next Obama, maybe even Clooney, because he's a star with a killer smile and that cool factor, got to think about what the repercussions will be. Are celebrities really the best candidates? At least celebrities that are not quite Ronald Reagan, because remember, he was an actor, and people will say, Laura, you work for Reagan, so don't you have a double standard here? No. It's true, I did work for President Reagan. I'm a Reagan conservative. But remember what Reagan did. He spent at least 2 decades studying, reading, debating anyone who would debate him, and writing on politics. He was masterful. He was a successful 2-term governor of California. He ran for president in 1976. He lost the nomination by a hair and then had to come clawing his way back 4 years later to change politics forever. It did not happen overnight. He didn't just write a check or launch into insults against his opponents. He did more than just drive-by hits on his political adversaries or just raise gobs of money for his political friends. I think what most of these celebrities will find out is that the talents that make them megastars in acting, sports, or music don't always translate into politics, at least not without a lot of really hard work. And you can't just issue ad hominem attacks on your political opponents without making a substantive argument at some point. Politics is not ease coverage on the red carpet. There's also a big downside for people in need of adoration. In today's environment, that moment you enter politics, national politics, let's face it, you alienate half the country. Millions of people will instantly dislike you. Many will hate you. Others will lie about you. Still others, just to elevate themselves and win back power, will say vile and hateful things that are demonstrably false. And let's face this, most celebrities have no desire to risk their cushy lives to really mix it up big time in politics. Thinking about it, the only one I can remember post-Reagan who did this is the one celeb, also a businessman like Clooney, that they are now vilifying 24/7. And that's the angle. Joining us now with reaction, actor Antonio Sabato Jr., Harmeet Dillon, civil rights attorney, and Lauren Wright, a Princeton University professor who's examining the issue of celebrities in politics. It's great to see both of you, all of you, excuse me. Antonio, I want to start with you on this. This is pretty wild. I mean, Jennifer Lawrence, you don't get any bigger than she is as a star of the big screen. She announces today she's taken a year off, and she's going to devote all of her time to a nonpartisan group. She insists that it's only about corruption. What do you say?
Right. Well, what I say is that she can take a year off because she has the money to back it up. She's making enough to probably take 2 or 3 years off. But let's face it, how are you going to help the community? Are you really going to get involved in politics? Are you going to really go out there and talk about the issues that we're dealing with, especially in California? Homelessness, skyrocket, we're #1 in that department. Regulations, taxes. If you go to San Francisco now, it's unwatchable what they've done, the liberals have done to that city, and especially in Los Angeles as well. So are we going to talk about the issues? Are we going to talk to the American people? Are we going to help the veterans? What are we actually doing here? Are we just going to blame everything on the president as usual?
Well, Harmeet, I want to get to you on this because I actually think the desperation on the left is palpable. You feel it now. And I'm saying this because Trump's actually winning on the issues. You see the popularity of the tax cuts today, a new poll out. Majority of Americans like what they're seeing. The economy is generally getting better. People are, less stressed. Business confidence, small business way up. So they're looking for the next Obama. And maybe it's Oprah, maybe it's Clooney, maybe it's a combination, maybe it's a new person. And so they lurch to the celebrity, yet when they're hit, even remotely criticized, they go bananas. Like they've never been criticized in their lives. But so if you want to put out the heat, you got to take it in return. What do you say?
Yeah, absolutely, Laura. I agree with you completely. I mean, the celebrities in Hollywood, they put all of their chips on Clinton, and then when she lost, I mean, they're kind of at a loss, and they live in a shallow, brittle world. It's all about their appearances. And so they haven't really been able to cope very well. And when anyone challenges their worldview, they lash out with this incredible vitriol and bitterness, as you mentioned. It's really the last refuge here of what's acceptable criticism and threats of violence in our culture today. It is against conservatives, and particularly conservative women who speak up on behalf of the conservative values in this country that got Donald Trump and other conservatives elected. So, Sarah Palin is fair game, you're fair game, Ann Coulter is fair game, Michelle Malkin, all of these people who challenge the dominant orthodoxy of Hollywood have all come in for threats of rape, threats of violence. The most horrible things are said about you and other women, and it's accepted in Hollywood. And I have a theory. I think that sometimes these Hollywood stars, they get into these projects like Jennifer Lawrence, who's 27 years old. She knows nothing about going state house to get legislation passed. I think that's an admirable goal, but it's a joke if she thinks it's as easy as memorizing lines or taking your clothes off on TV. But I think that, they do that because it's a way of expiation for some of the violence and some of the very negative things that they perpetrate in society that's corseting our society. A lot of what we see out of Hollywood is not positive.
Professor, what about, I know you're writing a book about this, the perils of celebrities wading into politics without having taken the time to actually, whether it's read a lot, debate a lot, think through the complex nature of some of these problems. Not that they don't have a right to speak out, but, it's more than just Trump is this or that, or whatever epithet happens to be in vogue during any period of time.
Well, yeah, you know, celebrities are not going to save democracy. The founders actually thought they were an affront to it. They were worried specifically about people getting involved in politics and getting elected, especially who were practiced in what they called the little arts of popularity, fame, in other words. And so I think what we have to watch for is celebrities that are running for office for themselves, not advocating for other people, because they're masters at garnering support on their own behalf. They're not so good, as we can see from the research that we have, at advocating for other people.
Well, I think the results speak for themselves. Antonio, again, talking for a living, I do it, you know, others do it. Harmeet's a major litigator in civil rights. Antonio, I know you give a lot of speeches. Talking is one thing, but actually getting involved in the nitty-gritty of legislation, policy proposals, that's kind of the drudgery of politics. It's like, I've never written legislation. I wouldn't know the first thing about how to write legislation. But I've been doing this for about 30 years now, so like I've learned a little bit. But what about the atmosphere right now in Hollywood, Antonio? You've talked about it, the lack of ideological diversity, or I'd say, or even curiosity about people with whom they disagree.
I don't get it, because I mean, the facts are the facts. They want to give all this money, for example, to Hillary. She was able to raise over $1 billion for her campaign, and look at the scandals, look at the things she's done. Benghazi being one of them. How could you vote for a person like that? So I think at this point we need to have people in Hollywood who are going to stand up for the Constitution. They're going to stand up for the great laws that we have in this country, and not for themselves. So I want to step up. You know, my campaign is about the people. It's not about myself. I left Hollywood to work for the American people. That's my concern. My community of Ventura County, my District 26, I'll do everything I can to protect them, to make sure that they have everything they need from Washington at any given moment. That's my passion right now. I live for this every single day.
Well, Harmeet, before we let you go, I don't think we're going to see the end of this. I mean, I think they really had their heyday during Obama. He was the celebrity candidate. I mean, Trump was mostly a businessman. He did The Apprentice. That was hugely successful. But he was mostly a businessman until he got involved in the Apprentice stuff. But I mean, Clooney is a star. I mean, he's a big star. I just don't see George Clooney giving up his life to just be another politician hitting the trail. I mean, he has a lot of fun doing what he does, but maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
No, that's right. No, you're right, and he's got a successful wife who has her own career. I mean, talk is cheap. It does look alluring to get all of that adulation that politicians seem to get, but I don't think the politicians think about the downside. Now, when you look at some of the politicians, the Hollywood people who are coming out of the woodwork the last couple of days, it tends to be people who are kind of on the downslope. You got Ellen Pompeo, who came out and said some negative things and, you know, threatened violence against you, I believe. I thought she was retired. I didn't even realize her career was still going. So, you know, this is one way to get it alive. Michael Rappaport's another who lost his job recently, and using vile threats to attack people on Twitter is a way to get celebrity back for these people. It's cheap, though. It's fleeting, and ultimately it's not going to make a difference in our society. So we need to look for leaders who are more substantive.
Well, Reagan, it doesn't create a single job.
Trump,
you know, it doesn't create a single job. I mean, Jennifer Lawrence is a huge star.
Right.
George Clooney's a huge star. You know, LeBron is a huge star. But its policy is not easy. It's tough. And it is drudgery. It is total drudgery. Guys,
it ain't
great
beanbag.
Yeah, it ain't beanbag. If you dish it out, you got to be able to take it. Guys, thanks so much. Great panel. Right. President Trump, by the way, is responding to the Florida school shooting, perhaps with a gun control measure. We're going to tell you what's going on and what he may be banning next.
This program is brought
into a ban in the wake of the Florida shooting, or the Las Vegas shooting more accurately. He's targeting bump stocks like the one used in that Las Vegas shooting in October.
Just a few moments ago, I signed a memorandum directing the Attorney General to propose regulations to ban all devices that turn illegal weapons into machine guns.
Well, bump stocks allow semi-automatic rifles to fire rapidly, close to an automatic rifle. Joining us now to discuss implications of the president's move, our executive director of the Gun Owners of America, Eric Pratt, and Philippe Reines, who is the senior advisor to the former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. Great to have you both on. Philippe, let's start with you. Good move on the part of the president?
I don't think you'd be surprised to hear me say yes. But, you know, I grew up in New York City. I'm not going to pretend I'm a lifelong hunter. I've never been hunting. I'm an animal lover. I totally understand why people love hunting. To me, guns were, the bad guys had guns, and I was happy the cops had more guns. But, you know, I'm going to put my cards on the table. I am a D.C. firearm licensed citizen. Now, I couldn't have this a decade ago until a man named Heller sued Washington, D.C. and won. But in that, Scalia, who I think we can all agree was conservative, he said there are limits to the Second Amendment. You can't tell people they can't have guns, but you can put reasonable prohibitions on guns. And it's hard for me to understand.
Oh, there are lots of prohibitions.
How a bump stock is not a reasonable. I've been sitting here timing this. We've been on air for 1:50. Stephen Paddock held that trigger for 11 minutes straight. We'll sit here for maybe 5 more minutes. Imagine a machine gun going off into a crowd, killing 58 people. That was a bump stock. Yeah, let's get rid of it. The NRA is against it.
Yeah, we just put up a photo of guns, whatchamacallit, Nicholas Cruz, who did not have a bump stock, but it was used in the Las Vegas shooting. I mean, the dramatic nature of this conversation, I think, is powerful. Like people, but emotions can't win the day. Facts are facts. Explain to us what the bump stock really is, please.
Well, it certainly doesn't convert a semi-automatic into.
That's what the president said.
An automatic.
Basically,
well,
kind of.
He's ordered that it be studied and that a rule be issued. And if they do go down that road, it's not going to stop bad guys from getting them, because no gun law yet has worked to stop bad guys. I mean, just look at Chicago. I mean, Chicago has been an utter failure. What actually would work is what candidate Donald Trump used to talk about, and that was repealing gun-free zones so that the good people can shoot back at the bad people. And unfortunately, that we didn't have that there in Florida. I mean, we protect our president with guns. We protect the Congress with guns, the senators, the representatives. But how do we protect our schools? We put a sign out front that says no guns are allowed here. Well, criminals
I've never understood, because when I was a kid or in junior high, and Mrs. McGillicuddy, my social studies teacher, I wouldn't want that woman packing a .22 in her purse in the break room.
Well, you know, he disagrees with you.
But he is saying teachers and principals.
And 81% of police officers absolutely say that's what we need to do.
77% of America want more gun control, and 70% of
But you know what? The Second Amendment trumps your polls. But 81% of officers.
I just want to get in here.
There has got to be some kind of reasonable additional restrictions that you agree with.
Guys, I was thinking about this.
What I agree, what we can agree is that the Second Amendment says the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed.
And Scalia did say,
should he be allowed to at 19 buy an AR-15?
Guys, can we just talk about something that maybe we can all agree on? I was remembering, in the late 70s, early 80s, when I was in school, we had fire drills. I mean, I grew up in Connecticut, but buying a gun was not a big deal. A lot of people had guns. I think they still do, but they have a lot more laws there now. We never had thought of having a drill for something like this. Something has shifted in society, both with us as individuals, with families, with common sense, with us caring about each other. I think we have to think about those. Those are big issues. I'm not saying there's nothing we can do.
Listening to these kids this week have made people think that way.
But you know what I'm saying? We never had to. We had more. I swear we had more guns in Connecticut.
But they're not the only ones that we should be listening to. There are other victims of mass shootings, like a man I personally know, an Officer Rob Young of California. He was shot at the Stockton, California school as a first grader. He completely advocates arming teachers and principals because he says we can't get there quickly enough. Same thing with Patrick Neville, who was a survivor of Columbine, says the same thing. He says I would have.
Anecdotally, you're always going to find.
But you grew up in Connecticut, like you said. Connecticut, after Newtown, changed its minimum law from 19 to 21. Why is it bad to make Florida the same thing? He couldn't get a handgun
So
at
what
that
you're
age.
trying to do is a
I'm trying to ask a question.
And I'm answering. This top-down approach saying you can't
Guys,
get a
but we'd
firearm
say you can't
is
at 19.
ineffective. It is not working.
You're right, it
pass a
didn't
law.
work. The kid bought a long gun and shot up a school with 17 people.
He fell through the cracks.
There are a lot of things.
He legally bought an AR-15 at the age of 19 because it was an AR-15. He did not have to go through a 3-day waiting period.
The problem was there was nobody at the school to stop him. That's what police officers say.
Mrs. McGillicuddy,
what you're saying.
Yeah, first of all,
I would not want my teacher.
I don't want to
disenfranchise
Mrs. McGillicuddy of her Second Amendment rights. I don't know her, but
shooting it out.
I don't know her, but I will say this. I think in this country right now, we have really big societal problems that nobody wants to discuss. And I will submit that you could ban the bump stock, you could ban AR-15, and we are still going to be dealing with massive sociological problems in our schools and sociopathic kids who nobody cares about, nobody loves,
or they will use
and I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm not disagreeing with you. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying we have bigger problems than the bump stock. I'm not saying that's the be-all and end-all of gun ownership or Second Amendment rights, but we have really big problems in this country. This kid was a mess, and he should never. I don't think he should have been able to get a gun. I don't think he should have been able to do what he did. Obviously, he's a total messed up freak, and nobody seemed to care about him. And the teachers couldn't do anything. The students were afraid of him. No one did anything. That's wild. And the FBI got a call that he was going to shoot up a school, and they did nothing.
If somebody like that isn't taken off the streets,
That's
then
wild.
no law is going to keep him from using any type
Actually,
of
a
weapon.
law that said he'd have to be 21 would have kept him.
That is so pie in the sky.
All right, guys.
Laws like that
Can I end on something I think we'd all
guys.
agree with? I think Stephen Paddock and Nicholas Cruz should rot in hell after a very with Cruz after a horrible,
I think
horrible
Florida
time.
would probably vote 90% for the death penalty. The left is going, by the way, crazy over what they're calling the death blow to Obamacare. Is that really true? The incoming Health and Human Services Secretary has announced new regs that could shake up the Obamacare landscape. He'll be here in an exclusive, his first interview up next. The Trump administration is proposing low-cost health insurance alternatives to Obamacare, and Democrats do not like it at all. Now, the plan would allow health insurers to sell short-term policies with lower costs and fewer benefits. Democrats immediately ridiculed it as junk, policies, trash, garbage. Senator Chuck Schumer released the following statement. Since day one, the Trump administration playbook on health care has been to sabotage the marketplaces, jack up costs and premiums for millions of middle-class Americans, close quote. Joining the angle exclusively to explain the proposal is the new Health and Human Services Secretary, Alex Azar. Mr. Secretary, thanks for giving us the first interview. Great to see you. So, boy, the blowback you guys are getting for offering an alternative is wild. Nancy Pelosi says Americans purchasing the shoddy, misleading, short-term Trump care plans will be one diagnosis away from disaster, et cetera, et cetera. In other words, it's Armageddon.
The shocking thing is these plans were, in fact, available until October of 2016 during the entirety of the Obama administration's tenure. Now we're bringing them back. They got rid of them at the end of the administration and said you can only have these plans that were 3 months. They cut them down to 3 months. And they don't have any of the Obamacare restrictions in terms of the mandates from the central government. It lets them be flexible so people can get lower cost plans if they choose to.
Yeah, so now you're in these plans that are supposedly health insurance, but it's not really, it's access, but people don't go to the doctor as much because the out-of-pocket costs are so high. The deductibles are so high. I keep hearing this from my radio listeners who call in and say, like, Laura, I have insurance, but it's $3,600 before I can take advantage of it. Are those people, like kind of the middle class, that were stuck in that area of the economy, or they're going to best benefit from this?
So we think a couple different groups of people could benefit from this. First, there are people for whom the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare's individual insurance plans are simply unaffordable. You know, premiums doubled before the end of the Obama administration. Nice. So individual market premiums have soared. So for many people, the plans are not affordable to get, and what they get may not be real insurance and good enough in terms of that kind of high deductible you're talking about. So for some of those people, these less expensive plans, often 1/3 the price of Obamacare plans might be a good option for them.
So pre-existing conditions, what happens?
So these plans don't have those Obamacare mandates around pre-existing conditions.
So the plans don't have to accept if you have
They don't.
I have lung cancer, take my case.
So for somebody like that,
Yeah.
other options would probably make more sense. But for other individuals, these may be the cheaper
Young people?
options. Young people, healthy people that are already being shut out of the Obamacare marketplace.
Because of the cost, high cost.
Because the way the plans were structured, the premiums are so high for the young and healthy, they've already been driven out of the marketplace. You know, our opponents on this talk about this as if we're right now living in the land of milk and honey and everything is perfect and nobody is lacking insurance. We're talking about the 28 million forgotten men and women who do not have insurance, that were promised affordable insurance. And President Trump, with his executive order, demanded that we come up with solutions and options like this for affordable, individualized health insurance.
You guys are just trying to kill off Obamacare. That's what you're trying to kill it off. And America's health insurance plans, a big industry trade group, they said, we remain concerned that expanded use of short-term policies could further fragment the individual market, which would lead to higher premiums for many consumers, particularly those with pre-existing conditions. Now, why are they so upset about this, Mr. Secretary?
Well, the National Association of Insurance Commissioners was in the past very supportive of these efforts to increase these affordable options for people. We're trying to just make options available for folks who've been shut out of the marketplace. Now, we need to keep working to build a different system than Obamacare. But while we have it, we need more affordable options for people to get the insurance they want, not what I tell them they should have.
Like, why should a 55-year-old man who's unmarried have to pay for birth control in his policy? Like, why is that something that...
Well, we want to make a system where people can buy the insurance that they want. Now, we need to work with Congress to be able to do that. That's the repeal and replace debate.
So this is a rulemaking. So you got 60 days of comment period.
Yep.
And then it goes into effect after.
Well, then we would review the comments and go to a final rule, and then that could be effective perhaps later this year. But these are things that we can do while Obamacare is still in place, things that we can do to help make insurance more affordable, at least give options to people. Like, let's say you lose your job and you're in transition.
Whoa.
Well, I don't want to.
No, I actually pay for my own house. I mean, I'm actually one of those individual marketplace purchasers, and my insurance has gone up like 47%, something like that. It's crazy.
Yep. So if you lose your job, these kinds of plans can be helpful for you.
Okay.
If somebody else loses their
thank
job,
you. I'm much happier with that.
These kinds of plans can be helpful for you as a transition. And so what we've said is we're proposing that these plans would be available for up to 12 months for people.
So
short-term plans.
So could you re-up after 12 months or no?
So we're actually asking for comment on whether we have the legal authority to let people renew their plans.
So that's a new health alternative. So young people between jobs, middle-class people, the poor people already get covered. They get the Medicaid, they get a coverage, but it's that group of people. Exactly. I don't understand how you're getting trashed. Are you having fun at your job yet?
I'm loving my job.
You are loving it? He was former general counsel of HHS. He was former deputy secretary of HHS, former law clerk Supreme Court, former top executive in business. I don't know who else could be more qualified for this job, but great to see you. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
Great to see you. Decades of one-party rule by Democrats. Well, can it be hazardous to your health? Up next, we're going to show you how they've turned a beautiful city into a rancid garbage dump. Don't go away. Well, the Democratic stronghold of San Francisco has become, well, especially in downtown, a festering pile of garbage, feces, and drug needles. According to a survey by a local news station, Bay Area's NBC's investigation of 153 city blocks, including popular tourist spots, found trash on every block, 300 piles of feces on 96 blocks, lovely, 100 discarded hypodermic needles on 41 blocks, that's all. So this is a sanctuary city, is it? Well, here's a local deli owner. He's fed up.
It's filthy. It's disgusting. Yesterday we taped somebody just on the side of my building peeing on my restaurant in broad daylight. I actually have pictures of people shooting up in the street. It's absolute mayhem at this point. It's completely out of control.
I had a caller on my radio show today, said she was in San Francisco recently with her kids, and she also saw someone shooting up right on the side of the street, tying up the arm and putting the needle in, had to shield her daughter's eyes. Not exactly a paradise for businesses or workers. Joining us now in San Francisco, San Francisco Republican Party Vice Chair Ken Liu is also a commissioner with the BART Police Citizen Review Board, and Ethan Bierman, a political commentator and Bay Area radio host. Now, Ethan, I love San Francisco. Let me just say, I love it. I have family there. I have friends there. Been going for a long time. It has a major problem. And I don't care if you're Democrat, Republican, or somewhere in between. It's not getting better. It seems to be getting worse. What do you think?
Well, I mean, it's true. It is problematic. I will say that under Mayor Ed Lee, who recently passed away, we've reduced the number of veterans who are homeless in the city of San Francisco. We are taking an approach, but remember, we are being handcuffed by a number of laws that prohibit the ability of taking care of people with mental health issues and making them get the psychiatric care that they need, getting them the addictive care. We allow people under the guise of civil liberties to be free and not put them in places to get the help that they need to protect and help themselves, let alone others, and allow them to become contributing members of society again. This is a really big issue. Nobody wants to step in feces. I have children. I don't want to do that either. I don't like finding used needles, but there are approaches, and the city is trying, but we actually need some federal help in this case, in my opinion, because a lot of the homeless are not from San Francisco. They come because they're not going to freeze to death when we're having a cold snap, unlike the rest of the country.
Are you blaming Trump for this? Are you blaming Donald Trump for the fact that San Francisco
Absolutely
has
not. This is a successive...
Okay. Yeah.
No, absolutely not.
Okay,
This is a successive series of issues and court rulings, for that matter. Laura, you know about that. We've had 4 federal courts rule that we can't do certain things.
Yeah, don't get me started on the judge. Don't get me started on the judges. I'm going to do a whole big segment on the judges tomorrow. But Ed, let's go to you on this. This is so sad on so many levels, but this is supposed to be the progressive paradise of San Francisco. It's a super Democrat majority. The Board of Supervisors for years, going back to Gavin Newsom, when he tried to get rid of the cash for remember the cash for the homeless? He wanted to do the vouchers. They fought him back then. He was my first guest, by the way, on my radio show that I ever had 17 years ago, was Gavin Newsom. But to me, it's gotten worse and worse, even with some modest improvements around the edges. Go ahead. I think we're having audio. Are we having audio problems?
I'm happy to answer that.
Hi,
Yeah, sorry, it's directed.
Laura, can you hear me now?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
It's directed to you, Ken.
So San Francisco hasn't had a Republican elected office for multiple decades now. And so none of the problems that we could see in terms of the homeless here can be attributed to the Republicans at all in San Francisco, simply because we don't have a single Republican elected to office representing San Francisco. The homeless epidemic that we have right here is just getting worse. In fact, every year, I was born here in San Francisco, and I could see progressively every year the problem has been getting worse and worse every year with no solutions. I've met with multiple Board of Supervisor members here in San Francisco, and they just keep asking for more money. And when they ask for more money, it's basically rewarding a program that doesn't have any benchmarks. There is no solution, and their solution is to just throw more money at the problem.
Well, Ken, what they're also doing is declaring themselves, year after year, we're a sanctuary city, we're a sanctuary state. We see the problem in Orange County, we see the problem in LA, we have tent cities in both places, and we're bringing more people into the situation, and more people who are indigent and themselves are without jobs and a way to support themselves. So I don't see how the sanctuary status of San Francisco or the state is doing anybody any favors. Ethan and Ken, great segment. Thank you so much. There's a lot to get through on this, and we're going to have to come up with some creative solutions that don't just require big, huge piles of federal money. That's not going to work. And the mainstream media is begging us to listen to the kids on gun control. But we're going to tell you what they're not doing with another kids group who also have a very, very large presence. Next. Politics and kids, that's the focus of tonight's bonus angle. As we mentioned earlier in the show, that nationwide rally for gun control organized by a few of the students from Douglas High School is set for March 24th. It's called the March for Our Lives. Here are some of the, well, at least one of the impassioned voices on the gun issue.
My fear is that there's going to be another school shooting. There's going to be no laws that change. We need stricter gun laws. That is what we need.
Change is happening. And yeah! Never again!
We call BS! That us kids don't know what we're talking about, that we're too young to understand how the government works. We call BS!
Of course, teens who've survived a mass shooting have every right to express themselves and be heard. That's America, and that's a good thing. But I can't help but notice that the media has a little double standard problem here. Consider the longest running annual march in U.S. history called the March for Life. That's that pro-life event that draws hundreds of thousands of people to Washington every January. By the way, it's usually in the bitter cold of rotten weather. There's no gauzy features or extended interviews about this march in the media. And of course, journalists conveniently ignore the fact that the pro-life movement is winning. The Washington Post was recently astonished to discover in 2017 a Quinnipiac poll that found 18 to 34-year-olds were the second most likely age group to oppose late-term abortions. So let's say we give those kids some mention as well, and maybe a little empathy, or at least a little fair coverage. That would be nice. The kids count? Well, that means all of their views. Stay with us.